So I'm going to try and make this talk with you. I have no idea what you would like me to talk about, so I'm going to ask about that in a little bit. Before we do that, I'm just going to introduce myself. Who here would like to have like the 5-minute introduction of who I am? Good. Hi, my name is Rami Ismail. I'm one half of Dutch independent studio Vlaambeer. I drink a lot of Coca-Cola. I do the business and I do the programming at the studio, and I also do marketing. This guy is JW. He's the other guy at Vlaambeer. He is the designer, which means he draws a lot in little notebooks and then yells at me. We made a whole bunch of games. This is we made Super Crate Box, Radical Fishing, Loot Trousers, Gun Gods, and a whole lot more games. This was Super Crate Box. This is the very first prototype of the game. It was called Crates from Hell back then. We made that in 2010 when we dropped out of university, which please don't drop out of university. It's a terrible idea. When we dropped out of university, we were immediately successful in that we had to live off of these for about 2 years of our life. They're really nice. They come in 3 flavors, duck, chicken, and beef. The duck ones are good. The other ones are like plastic. So we needed money, and then we made a game about shooting fish with machine guns because that seemed the most reasonable thing to do to us. And we took the money that we made with Radical Fishing to turn that early prototype into Super Crate Box. And Super Crate Box was an immediate hit. It was a freeware game, but it was nominated for the Independent Games Festival Award, which is like the Oscars of indie games or something. So instead of eating ramen noodles, suddenly we were flying to San Francisco and like fancy award ceremony. It was really, really cool. So then suddenly people were paying attention to us. So we made a first-person shooter about hip-hop on Venus. And then people started asking us to give talks, and then somebody asked if we could make a serious sound game, so we made a turn-based RPG. And then we started going to events, and we started selling t-shirts and stuff, and people bought them for some reason, which was awesome. Then we started working on this game called Ridiculous Fishing, which, if you remember the game about fishing with machine guns, we thought we'll do that again, but on iOS as like a real commercial game this time. And we started working on that, and yeah, that went really well. We got a really cool team together, and then sort of unexpectedly, a studio in San Francisco saw what we were making and decided we can make that and we can make it faster. So they did that and stole our game idea and released it, and their game did really, really well. So we got really, really sad, and we almost sort of quit because, you know, if everybody can just steal your ideas, even if you work on them for years, why the hell are we doing this, right? And then instead we went to the New York Times, and this is us in the New York Times, which apparently Game Development can put you in the New York Times, which was awesome. And we started kind of fighting back. There's duct tape on this cable. That's weird. Yeah? Yeah. I'm just a little bit worried. New laptop. Anyway, so we went to the New York Times. People started paying more attention because we're in the New York Times, so that probably means we're important or something. And then we released the fishing game, and it did super well. Actually, it won the 2013 Apple Game of the Year award. And then yesterday morning, Pocket Gamer rated it the 2nd best iOS game of all time, which so yeah, won some awards, and then we started working on a game called Nuclear Throne, which we worked on for 2 years. It was actually made during a 2-day game jam originally. It was called Wasteland Kings back then, and then for the next 2 years after that, we polished that game until it was a full commercial game. It was in early access for about 2 years. It released December 5th of last year on PC and Mac and Linux and PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita. And it did really, really well. So really, really proud and happy about that. So that's me. Is everybody kind of clear on what I do? Yeah? Anybody else need another 5-minute or two? I'll just start over if it's still unclear. I've done this part very often. Okay, so let's jam. What do you want me to talk about? I made 10 slides and I didn't fill them in. So what do I put there? Somebody, Give me a subject to talk about. You can just yell. It's fine.
Thinking outside the box.
Sorry? Game. That's not a slide. That's like a 4-hour. Like people pay thousands of euros to take 4-year classes in game design. If I could do that in 10 minutes, I'd sell it to you. But something more specific. What about game design? Controls?
Yes.
Game controls. Where's the home button? Okay. This is gonna be weird to bridge into something else, but okay. Slide 2.
Thinking outside the box.
Thinking outside the box. I need to learn how to spell outside. Okay?
Is early access a hoax?
Is early access a hoax? Okay? This is gonna be the weirdest presentation ever given.
4.4.
What?
4.4.
The 444 rule? 444 rule? That's a good one to give at a jam always. Okay?
The art of screen shape.
The art of screen shake. It's turning into a Vlaanderen talk now. Oops. Okay? Finding inspiration, man. If I had the answer to that one, I would be like one of those motivational speakers. Oh wait, I am a speaker.
Choosing an art style.
Sorry?
Choosing an art style.
Choosing an art style. Yeah, okay. I've got 3 more slides. Make them good. Come on. Living as a game developer. Oh God, this is gonna turn. This is gonna turn depressing. Okay.
Life before the jam.
Commercial development.
Who said narrative distance? You're fired. I need to hire you before I can fire you, but we'll work it out. Making commercial games? Is that really the... VR? No, let's not do VR. I've done VR. PR. Oh God. Because VR, the first thing I got when I got my VR sets is figure out how fast I can make people throw up, and it's fast. Sorry? A leak? Okay. Something else? Yeah, but we're going to do that under inspiration. Brainstorming. Inspiration as well?
Playing your game.
Balancing, playing your game.
Controversy.
Controversy? Does that... Okay. What I wish I knew. Okay. How do we what is the name of this talk? How are we going to name it? This is 10 random slides.
Flambeer Megamix.
Flambeer Megamix. Done. Okay. Good. Hi. My name is Rami, Ismail. I'm one half Dutch and Pensudu. No, we'll skip this whole part. It's okay. My name is Rami. I drink a lot of Coke. This JW draw stuff. We made a bunch of games. This is Super Crate Box. Don't drop out of university. Radical Fishing is a game about fishing with machine guns. Prototype, full game, shooter, talks, Serious Sam, shirts, ridiculous fishing, New York Times. Won some awards, did well. Nuclear Throne. Hi, welcome to my talk. This is the Flambeer Megamix. I very carefully prepared this talk over the last few days. Lots of practice. So this is going to go flawlessly. Oh God, I'm running out of time already. Hi. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is quite unexpectedly is game controls. And games are a very interesting medium when you think about it, because games are special in that they only work when somebody is putting input into the game, right? So when you think about it, A game is not complete without a player. Now, depending on the game you're trying to make, the controls are going to be really important. You can do all sorts of things. If you've played something like Cookie Clicker, that's an idle game, the controls are very, very minimalistic, but still vitally important to the game actually working, right? Now, if you make a game like an action game, if you've played Hotline Miami, Super Crate Box, something like that, you'll notice that there's a lot more input going on. Now, there's a lot of considerations when you're thinking about game controls. I have a few rules that I like to keep myself. The one rule that always helped me is when you have a button in your game that the player has to press, is there a reason for them to not press that button? That's a question a lot of people are not thinking about, and they play a lot of shooting games where you just hold the shoot button all the time, right? Play a lot of driving games where you hold the acceleration button all the time. What is the reason to let go? Because when you think about it, every input has two states, unless you're using an analog controller, but at least two states, and you can use both of them. And if you do that, you give a lot of things a lot more responsibility, and when you do game design, you want to do something elegant and small, which is probably what you're trying to do during a game jam, because you only have 2 days, right? Something you want to be careful with is make the fewest amount of mechanics and inputs, but give them as much responsibility as possible. Now, the other thing that's really important with controls is they have a feel. And this goes for everything in a game, but every button you press has a feel. It's not just something that, if key left, then this. How should that button feel? Everything in a game has a narrative quality. Everything in a game has a quality in terms of what the player is going to feel, what the player is going to do. And that's even pressing left. Because if you look, in some games, if you press left, the character moves exactly 1 pixel. And that's it, right? And in some, it slides. And you press left and it accelerates and it stops. And in some games, it rotates something. But the amount that it rotates, the amount of slide it has, does it have inertia, does it have friction, how much friction? That's all very important. And that actually tells a story. One of the most interesting, well, let's not stand here. One of the most interesting uses of controls that you very often see is, have you ever played like one of those really big AAA games? And you're like, it's a shooting game, right? And you're running around, and you're shooting all sorts of people because, yay, violence or something. And then at some point, you get shot a lot as well, and then you just take cover, and then the screen stops bleeding, and you breathe 5 times, and now you can run again because video games, right? But then we need to have like this very important last fight. So during the last fight, and this goes back to ludonarrative dissonance as well, by the way, but during that last fight, at the start of it, your hero gets like stabbed. And now suddenly they're dying, right? They've just been catching 7,000 bullets during the game, but it's all fine because you have regenerating health. But during the final boss fight, that doesn't count anymore because it's a story thing. Now, if you pay attention, every game does the exact same trick at that moment, which is they make your movement slower. That's all. They just make you move slower. And what does that do? It makes you feel weaker. It's a very simple trick. All they change really is the input. What does the input do for you? But the effect is quite dramatic. If you want to make a game and you want to make somebody feel weaker, just take their controls away. Because the controls is what gives players agency. It's what gives them control. So don't think of controls as just something simple, and something that allows the player to just one-on-one interact with the game. Your controls are a storytelling mechanic. They're a way to tell a story. They're a way to communicate a feeling. They're a way to make somebody feel powerful or weak or confused. And sometimes they can be really functional. Just click on this word and something happens. But if you look at some of the best Twine games, which are literally, choose your adventure games, you click on words and that's it. Some of the best Twine games actually play very, very carefully with control. Words that disappear or move away from your mouse cursor to make you feel frustrated, or things that you can't click on, which is also a form of input, something that doesn't work. So when you think about controls, when you think about the game you're trying to make, maybe try and think a bit about what can I do with controls that isn't just left, right, up, and down, right? What can I do beyond just a shoot button, or a jump button, or an interact button, or a collect button? Can I make them feel interesting? Can I make them feel different? Good. Game controls. That didn't go too poorly. So what I'm trying to say is you need to think outside the box. Wow. But I do actually want to recommend you to think outside the box because we're at a game jam. One of the great things about a game jam, don't take this the wrong way, but it doesn't really matter if what you make sucks, right? We're going to be here for 48 hours. And for those 48 hours, we're going to make some awful, terrible, awkward, horrible games. And some of them are also going to be really good. And some of them are going to need like months of work to make something nice out of it. Some of them are just not going to work. And some of them are going to be awesome. And all of it is fine, because either way, at the end of this, we're going to have been here for 48 hours. We're going to have had a great time. And we're going to have games that we made. We're going to have learned something. So don't worry about that. This is not a make the best thing ever thing. This is a let's think outside the box, make something weird, see what happens, right? If what you do is always you like making arcade shooter games, make something totally different. Make a text adventure, make a walking simulator, make a racing game. You hate sports games? Make sports games. The last people that I talked to that made sports games in London, they were trying to make a car combat game, you know, like Mad Max style. Then one day, they were testing the physics of the crashes. You know, when two cars drive into each other, what happens? And something was off. And they decided, you know what? We'll just add a random physics object to the game. You know what they added? A ball. You know what that game is? Rocket League. It's one of the biggest games of the last few years. And literally what happened is they made something and then they did like, well, let's just drop in a physics object, see what happens. That's how games get made. Everybody thinks that every big company, as if we know what we're doing. Like we start on a game, we go like, how about we make a game with a fish with a guitar? And then Nuclear Throne happened. You know, a game about fishing with machines. We were watching a documentary about overfishing, right? People fishing too much and exhausting natural resources. And there was this beautiful slow motion shot of a fish being flung up into the air. And what we'd been talking about was Duck Hunt, which is a game with a Nintendo, like, you know, the Nintendo gun that you shoot at your TV. And we just put the two together. And that was radical fishing. And that's how my studio started. Literally, was a conversation about Duck Hunt. So, if you're going to be making a game this week, another thing I would really like to recommend you is try to find your... Oh shit, I'm talking about inspiration already. Try to find your inspiration outside of video games. Try to find it in documentaries, books, movies, music, the weather, that weird lamp, the no smoking sign, the staircase, I don't know, anything. Anything, the architecture of the building, the way the light falls. Like, find something that isn't a video game and make that, because it's going to be 48 hours, and at the end of it, you know, if it's not good, it doesn't matter. If it's good, we'll see what happens. But this is your chance to make something really weird. A lot of people put their really weird games on early access, and not all of them are good. Is early access a hoax? I don't think early access is a hoax. Is it a good idea? I don't think it's a good idea either. Early access, like anything, and this goes for anything that you do in business, there's the right thing for every game and there's the wrong thing for every game, right? And this sounds really simple, but the amount of narrative games I've seen on early access makes me really sad. If you have a game with a story that you can play once, don't put it on early access. If you're making a game that you can play infinitely over and over and over again, like a roguelike, like Nuclear Throne was, then use early access. Early access is sort of an interesting thing. It's the part of the democratization of the business of games, right? It's more and more easy to distribute your game. 10 years ago, Vlambeer wouldn't have stood a chance because it would have been impossible for us to sell our games. But now we've got Steam and we've got PlayStation Network and we've got ID at Xbox, we've got itch.io, we've got all of these services that are there just to, you know, sell our games. But if you make something, don't just try to do all of them. Try to think very, very carefully about what kind of business you want to do. If you want to sell your game, how are you going to sell your game? At what price are you going to sell your game? Are you going to sell it at a price? Are you going to release it for free? And if you're going to put it on early access, have you thought about the amount of effort that takes? Because the same thing I see in a lot of studios is, we're going to put it on early access and we'll see. We're going to put it on Kickstarter and we'll see. Those always fail. I've never seen a game that did that where it worked out. And the reason that is because a lot of that takes community effort. Somebody has to manage the community. Somebody has to manage the people that are going to give you feedback and that are going to talk to you. And the first part of making a game is the really fun part, and it's the really fast part. And then everything after that is just pure production, right? You make something really fun, and in the early parts, everything you touch changes the game forever. You can feel it. Like, you know, you make the jump height slightly higher, it's a different game. You make your character run twice as fast, it's a different game. Like, you can feel every change you do is important. And then the light went up. And then those lamps were just like, I don't know what I have to do. Like, a very confused lamp. But the early part of making a game is really, really fun, and then the long haul is actually a lot harder. If you really, really, really love the game that you're making during this jam, you decide you want to continue on it, please don't forget that it's not going to stay fun. It just isn't. That's not how game development works. So what I'm trying to say is the first part of your game development is very different from the second part of your game development. And that's what this 444 rule refers to. Can anybody guess what this is about who doesn't know what it's about? If you add up the two numbers, what do you get? What does that refer to, you think?
48 hours.
The hours. We've got 48 hours to make a game. Now the basic rule that I keep in mind for game development is if you spend X amount of hours on something, it's going to take that amount of hours times 10 to polish it into something good. So the 444 rule is literally my way of saying spend 4 hours making your game. You've got 4 hours to make a game. At the end of those 4 hours, you need to figure out whether it's good or not, whether you're happy with it. And if it is, you commit to it, and you keep going until the end, but all you do is polish. You don't add. You don't make new you don't make new stuff. You don't introduce new mechanics. Just the stuff you made in the first 4 hours, polish. Make it feel nicer, make it look better, make it sound nice, talk to somebody who can make the music if you don't have a musician or you aren't a musician. Spend that time polishing this one thing, because as you're polishing, you're going to find things that you dig at, right? So when you're making a game, it's not as if good game designers know, you know, this is it, right? What they got really good at during their experience in the industry is digging. So you make something and then you feel it's good. Something in you feels it's good, it's interesting, it's weird, it's different, you're happy with it. But you don't know what it is. Your first job as a designer is to figure out what that is. What is the thing that's interesting? What's the thing that made you go, this is good? Is it the movement? Is it the jump? Is it the interaction? Is it that it's a new type of interaction? Is it something you've never seen before? Is it clever? Is it the art style? Is it the music? Is it the fact that the music is connected to the movement? Is it that the art is connected to the movement? What is interesting? Is it a cool double jump? Is it a way of speaking to another character that is interesting and makes you feel things? What is it? What is interesting? If you spend 44 hours polishing it, you have a lot of time to figure that out. But if you don't, if you just keep adding, what you're going to do is not make the game better. You're going to muddle it. Because you've got 48 hours. You maybe got time to dig at one thing. You don't have time to dig at all the things. So every time somebody adds something, and this is a very common mistake people make, is they think games get better when you add more stuff. A good design isn't when you can't add things anymore. A good design is when you can't take anything away anymore without it breaking. Okay? So when you're making something, find that little core, that thing that you're trying to make, and see what's interesting. Find that. Polish that. That is the diamond of your game. That's the interesting part of your game. Don't go and build. If you find something very valuable, a beautiful gem or something, the way you deal with that is not by building a house around it, right? You don't just put dirt around it to be like, let's add more stuff, and then we'll see what happens. No, what you do is you take the gem and you put it in a glass cage so you can see it perfectly. Do that with your game. Think about your game like that. Don't shake the gem. So, all right, the art of screen shake is a talk that my colleague JW gave a few years ago, and what the talk is about the concept of juice. And Martin Grapefruit gave a talk about that from Sweden, in Sweden. And basically the idea is that games are about interaction, as I talked about early on with controls, but it's not just the controls that you can make feel nice. Think of every meaningful choice the player has to make. Think of every interaction that is important to the player, right? So if you're thinking about Pong, what are important moments? Important moments are when the ball hits the paddle, because it means you did something right. It's when the ball hits a stone, because now you got a point. It's when the ball hits a wall, because now it's bouncing and changing direction, right? Every time the ball changes direction is important. How do you communicate those moments? And one way of doing something, if you're making an action game, one way of making something feel nice is by shaking the screen. And I have to admit, we use that quite a lot at Flambeer. Maybe a bit too much. One of my favorite bug reports ever was when we sent Luftrausers to certification, which is and Luftrausers is a dogfighting game we made. We're just gonna stand here? No. Luftrausers is a dogfighting game, an airplane game that we made, and you know, the screen shakes a lot in the game. So we sent it to Sony for the official certification, and certification is the process where you send your game to a platform, and they're gonna do one really big final QA sweep. And then they're gonna give you bugs, and you have to fix those before the game can launch. Which is why sometimes games slip or don't hit a launch date, because they'll come back and say, like, this needs to be fixed. And some of those are really, really weird. They have this thick book full of rules, and some of them are like, you have to have, in a console game, you have to have a screen at the start with like press X or press start. And the reason they do that is so that they know which controller the player is holding, because that's the controller they press the button on. And you can't put information in the outer 20%, the outer 10% of your screen, because some people have screens with different ratios, and back in the days, games couldn't adapt for that, so they had a title save zone. There's hundreds of rules like that, and if you get them wrong, your game might get rejected. Now for Luftrausers, I got my favorite bug report ever, which is sometimes the screen shakes violently. And I thought it was a bug, so we emailed back what we know. And then I said, that's the way the game is supposed to be. And we were like, that's the way the game is supposed to be. And then they said, okay. And then we launched Luftrausers with a whole ton of screen shake. But it's still my favorite thing where somebody just looked at our game and went like, that's a bit too much, right? So sometimes it's too much. When you do juice, when you do interaction, think about the moments that are important to your player, communicate those as clearly as possible. And on top of that, whenever you think something is obvious to your player, please remember that you are the worst playtester in the world. Because you are making this game. There is no way you can do objective feedback. If you have something that seems very exaggerated, exaggerate it more. If you have a UI element that is really big, make it bigger. Because nobody ever notices. If you think your UI is super obvious, go playtest it once and see how many people notice that there is a UI. I could have made a really cool bridge with, you know, they can't find the UI and they're finding inspiration. Too late now. So I said before, if you're gonna find inspiration, please do it somewhere else. Don't do it in games. There's gonna be a theme, I guess. Use that for inspiration. Inspiration is a weird thing because it's not really something you can force. What you can do is just throw a ball at things and see what sticks. So don't worry too much if you don't have inspiration. That's one of those things where people say like, take care of your inspiration, take care of your motivation. Like the other part is discipline, which is just sit down and fucking make something already, right? You don't have inspiration? A cat chasing a car. Video game, make something, right? Like, there's nobody in this room that cannot come up with an idea within 12 seconds. If I point at somebody, they can come up with an idea. The only reason they might not is because they're terrified I'm pointing at them, right? So, everybody can come up with an idea. If you're stuck and you don't have inspiration, don't forget, 4 hours to make a game. Spend those 4 hours making stuff, doesn't matter. If maybe your inspiration is mechanical, I want to make a game with double jump. Make a game with double jump. Maybe it's, I want to make a game about collecting something. Then start making something that you can collect. You know, like just get going. And when you get the theme and you sit down and you're going to brainstorm, because somebody asked about brainstorming, one really simple rule that always worked for me, wow, this sounds like a bad advertisement. One really simple rule that always worked for me is your first 3 ideas don't count. Right? So if the theme is extinction, everybody's going to say dinosaurs, comets, and zombies. Those don't count. Don't use them. Go for the 4th one. Think about something different. Because the obvious ones are not usually the fun ones. Spend some time like brainstorming a bit further than that. For your art style, do I have time? I have time. For your art style, this is actually a really simple one. If you are, who here is an artist? Cool. Who here is not an artist? Okay, you all don't choose the art style. It's that simple. Your artist chooses the art style. You know why? Because they're an artist. Let them deal with that shit. This is the same thing as having a musician on board and telling them how to do music, even though you've never touched an instrument in your life. Yes, you might have opinions. Those are really cool. Feel free to let them know. Also accept if your artist says, no, this is what I'm making, okay? Now the one thing you do want to do is if you have a design and you are an artist, think about what the best way to represent the core mechanics is. So if you're making something that's really precise and really accurate, and it's really important that the player knows whether something hits something or not, which is our games very often, go for pixels. Why pixels? Because pixels are honest. They either overlap or they don't, right? If you are making a game that is very narrative, and you want to do like a soft atmosphere, do something softer. Use, you know, different colors. Use something that it maybe isn't pixels, or maybe do. It really depends on what you want to do, but try and think about what the designer is trying to accomplish, right? And then figure out what you want to do with the art style. Ultimately, it's always up to you as an artist. Should always be up to you. Sort of a detour, make clear roles in your team. Please do that. You've got 48 hours. Not all of you might know each other. When you start, you get your team together, sit down and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, so that you don't get stuck arguing over all sorts of things later. The artist makes the art calls, the designer makes the design calls, the musician makes the music calls, programmer makes the programming calls. Do it that way, okay? Just get your stuff together early on, assign clear responsibilities, make it easier to talk. And accept that sometimes things won't go the way you want, right? Sometimes your artist is going to choose an art style where you look at it and you go, like, this is awful. And they're maybe thinking the same thing about your game design, right? And that's fine. Just have a good time, make something nice. I wish I was good enough an actor to just start crying now. Game development is a job, okay? How many of you are aspiring game developer students, people that want to go into the games industry? How many of you are in the games industry currently? All right. Here's the thing. Anybody in this room is completely out of their mind. For one very simple reason. If you want to be in the games industry, you're probably good at something very specific. You're an artist, you're a programmer, you're a designer, either way you're a problem solver. And you can earn much more money in any other industry that your skill set affords. If you're a programmer, you could go to IBM and make more money. If you're an artist, you could practice for architect or for something else in the arts, really, and earn more money. And if you're a musician, movies have way more money to spend on music than games. And if you're a designer, nobody even knows what your job description is. So, honestly, this is kind of the worst place to be. And the reason you are here is because you're passionate about games, right? Which is awesome. That's going to carry you some part of the way. And then the other part of the way is discipline, is sitting down and doing stuff. And then the final part of this puzzle is taking care of yourself. And that's something I learned only 3 years into my job at Vlaambeer. But please take care of yourself. If you get tired, take a nap. It's okay, it's a game jam. I know it's 48 hours. I know we're all really excited to make something cool. Please sleep a little bit. You know? If you're not feeling well about the interaction in your team, somebody is being an ass, it's okay to leave the team. It's okay to ask them to leave the team. It's okay to talk about it with your other team members. It's okay to talk. Ask each other if you're doing okay. Just make this a thing in your team. Like, just as a I'm not going to say obligatory or required thing, but every 4 hours, just sit down and go like, is everybody feeling okay? And then I don't mean like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, no, just is everybody feeling okay? Me and JW, me and my co-founder, we don't like each other. Me and him have never liked each other. I thought he was an obnoxious hipster, and he thought I was a suit, right? And the only reason we started working together is because we both hated our school more than we hated each other. So we dropped out, and we started a company together because we were the only two people dropping out, and that's literally how it started. I've never liked the guy. He's never liked me. He skips my birthday party. I skip his birthday party. But one of the most frequent things we ask each other is, are you okay? Just on Slack or like Skype, because we don't want to talk face to face. But like, are you okay? You know, do you need a break? Do you need to like take a nap? Do you need to go away? Do you need to not talk to me for a while? Like, you know, are you okay? Make that part of what you do, because in the end, large part of game development, large part of living as a game developer, whether you're an independent or whether you're a AAA, is communicating. And it's one thing they never teach you in schools, but it's always communicating. Can you communicate your ideas? Can you talk to people about how they're doing? Can you communicate your worries? Can you communicate your concerns? Can you communicate during your brainstorm? It's a soft skill. It's not a skill you can measure, right? Can you fit in with a team? Communicate. And communicate honestly, and communicate with regard for the people you're talking to. So if you're talking to somebody, don't cut them off, let them finish. If you have a thought, follow up after they finish. Don't think your opinion is more important than that of somebody else. If you're brainstorming, stay positive. Brainstorming, never say no. Okay, when you're brainstorming, the only thing you can ever say is yes and. Never no. Never this is not good. Never negative. Brainstorming is positive. It's get all the options on the floor, right? So yes and. So if somebody says dinosaurs or you don't want to do dinosaurs, you can't say no. Say yes and maybe we could do something with spaceships, right? Now I've got a dinosaur spaceship game, and this is getting weird, and that's kind of cool. So yes and. Always use yes and. And when you're trying to tell somebody something isn't good, it's okay to tell people that something isn't good. Part of our job is to tell people that something is not good. I always say that I've got a few minutes. I always say there's 4 types of feedback, right? You've got something is good and you say it's good, that's great. You've got something is good and you say it's bad, that's kind of weird. But also it's okay, because the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to look at it and be like, no, it's good, right? You've got something that's bad and you say it's bad, which is great, because now they know they can fix it. They've got something that's bad, but you say it's good, and now you're an asshole. Because you just sent people off with the idea that this is good and it's bad, and you know it's bad, but you didn't tell them. So I always tell people that something is bad, but what I'm not trying to say is be blunt. What I'm trying to say is, if something is bad, be honest about that, but please think about the other people as human beings. The way I've been taught to give bad feedback or negative feedback is the sandwich method, which is, you want to say something is bad, find something that's good. There's always something that's good. Even in the worst video game ever, there's something that's good. Then give them the bad news, and then give them one more thing that you like. So, I love the way, oh, that's too pretty. I love the way the game looks. I don't like anything I do in this game, but that tree is really pretty. Right? Use that. But genuinely, find things you like when you give feedback, and find things you don't like. Be a bit less blunt than what I did just now. PR. I love talking about PR. Here's the thing, none of that is relevant for today. And none of it is relevant for tomorrow, and none of it is relevant for the day after. The thing you want to know about PR, and the only thing you need to know about PR is not separate from game development. PR is literally about your relation with the public. And part of the public is your player. So the thing about PR, honestly, is how do I communicate this game? And if you're making a fast-paced shooting game about explosions, your PR is going to be fast-paced and it's going to be explosive. And if you're going to make a game that is calmer and more quiet, find something that's calmer and more quiet. One of the strangest things that I keep seeing is people, when they want to do PR, they try to be a AAA company, which is to say, they work on their game quietly in stealth mode, and then 2 weeks before launch, they send emails to the press, and then nothing happens every single time. Because that's a strategy that you can do if you're EA and you've got a boat of money that you can spend on advertisement. Then 2 weeks is fine. When you make a game, think about what the game is and what you're trying to evoke. I like to think of it as, I call it an essence statement. So you've got your pitch, which is your explain what is interesting about the game in 3 sentences. Then you've got your essence statement, which is what is the game supposed to make the player feel in 1 sentence. And I know I keep using the word feel, but I'm not trying to say like sad or happy or whatever. Like if I make action games about explosions, right? Part of what I want to make the player feel is mastery. That's the thing, right? And something that I want to make the player feel in Ridiculous Fishing is first laughter, because you fling fish into the air and they shoot them with machine guns, but then also positive. Nothing in Ridiculous Fishing is ever negative. Even if you are absolutely horrible at the game, every round of Ridiculous Fishing you play earns you something. There's no way to go back down. It's always up. And those are things that we just establish very, very early so that our team can communicate clearly. PR is not separate from communicating clearly. It's just communicating clearly with people that aren't part of your team. So get your communications internally right for these 48 hours. Make sure that your nose is all in the same direction. And then after this is done, if it's good, figure out how to communicate that to other people. Okay? What I wish I knew. Holy shit. So I thought that game development was always fun, and it's not. It can be heartbreaking, and it can be sad, and it can be frustrating, and there's a lot of points where you have to sacrifice things that you love. And I don't mean like, you know, like pets or something. I mean like mechanics or art styles or anything. It's emotionally very exhausting. I didn't think about that either. I wish I knew that everything I thought I knew about the games industry when I went into it was wrong. I like to think of PR, you know, like marketing and like the big websites. I like to think that the way they worked was you send them an email where you tell them your life story and why you love video games and why this game is so special to you, and then they write about it, which is literally they look at the email and they go like, holy shit, this is too much to read at 8 a.m. in the morning, and they delete it. I wish I knew that every game, I wish I knew that I'm a programmer and that programmers are the worst schedulers in the world. Honestly, if a programmer says it's going to take 2 weeks, that means 2 months. And they say it's going to take a day, it might be 2 hours or 30 seconds or a year. I wish I knew that the way programmers and artists and designers and musicians look at the world is different. Because I thought I could just sit down with my artists and be like, yeah, no, so what we're doing is like this cool effect that it's like a scaling thing, like you can just look at the code and then, you know, you can figure it out, and it turns out that my artist couldn't do that. I wish I knew that the best way to communicate between different types of people is with just letting them do what they do best. If the artist wants to communicate an art style, have them draw it. And if a designer wants to show an idea, have them prototype it. And if a musician has an idea for a song, have them sketch it out or let them play it on an instrument. Just tiny sketches, silhouettes, fast little thoughts in a notebook. Those work. I wish I knew what I didn't know. I wish I knew that I didn't know what I didn't know. I think that's the bigger thing, is there's so much to know about the games industry, and it's such a wonderful place, and there's so much amazing stuff, and so much amazing talent. And I travel the world all the time, and I meet new people that do amazing stuff, that do stuff that I've never seen before. And I learn every day. I learn every time I go somewhere. Every time I go to a jam like this, I learn something new about the games industry. And I used to think I knew it all, right? I used to think that I've been making games since I was 6. Like, clearly when I was like 18 and going to game design school, I knew what I was doing. Duh, like, all I needed to do to be the next, like, Warren Spector is make a new Deus Ex, right? All I need to be like Jade Reynolds' Assassin's Creed, or like, it all seems so simple. And part of it is. Part of game development is really simple. Sit down, make the fucking game. Do it. Get going. Get working. And then on the way, you're just going to run into things that you didn't expect. And the one thing I learned about the games industry is whenever you get stuck and you don't know, and whenever you get stuck and you need help or answers, the games industry is there. The people in this industry love the people in this industry. The people in this industry love the people that are trying to get in this industry. Because like I said, to be in this industry, you have to be out of your mind. And we all are. We all are a little bit. We all are so passionate about this that we are going to spend the next 48 hours in our life in a place that by the end of these 48 hours is probably going to smell pretty awkwardly. And we're all going to be kind of proud with like little tired eyes about this kind of thing we made, right? And we're all going to be proud. We're all going to be happy. So whenever you get stuck, don't feel free to ask. Don't feel afraid to ask. Don't feel afraid to ask. Feel free to ask. Man, when you do that slide improvised talk, it will always go wrong a slide time. That's something I wish I knew. No. Never feel afraid to ask. Okay? Don't feel afraid to ask me. Don't feel afraid to ask any person that you look up to in the industry. Even if they're like important, big people. Don't feel afraid to ask your heroes. Don't feel afraid to ask out to them. Send them a message on Twitter. Let them know you appreciate their work. All of us in the industry have gotten to where we are because of the people that helped us. There was a beautiful tweet a few days ago that said something along the lines of anybody who said that they're a self-made success is lying. Because all of us have gotten here with help and with support and with inspirations from other people, and all of us want to pay that back. So whenever you get stuck, just ask. I hope that went well. I don't think we have time for Q&A. I don't see anything. I don't see anybody shaking their head no, so I guess there's Q&A. Okay, Q&A, hi. Will I be jamming? Will I be jamming? I don't know. Do we jam? Do you want to jam? Hi. Adriel says we're jamming, so we're jamming something. Hi, yeah. Anything else? Any other questions? No? Good. Thanks so much.